The afternoon sun spilled over the city like molten gold, but inside Marvin Hale's chest the light never seemed to reach. He stood outside the cafe, clutching the strap of his daughter's tiny backpack, unaware that he was walking into a cruel setup arranged by people who claimed to be his friends. They thought it would be funny. They thought he needed to lighten up. They thought pairing him, an overworked, widowed single dad, with an overweight woman they mocked behind her back, would be nothing more than harmless fun. What none of them knew was that Marvin carried wounds far deeper than loneliness, and the woman he was about to meet carried her own scars, hidden behind a quiet, practiced smile. What happened inside that cafe would not only break hearts, but expose truths they never imagined. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your support helps these stories reach those who need them most. Marvin inhaled slowly, trying to calm the nerves that rattled inside him like loose coins. Life had not been gentle. 3 years earlier, he lost his wife to a sudden illness, and since then he had devoted every waking hour to raising his little girl, Nora. She was 5, gentle-eyed and soft-spoken, with a habit of picking flowers and apologizing to them when they wilted in her hands. Marvin loved her more than life itself, but the weight of grief, bills, and responsibilities clawed at him every day, leaving him exhausted, hollow, and uncertain of how to step forward in a world that kept moving without mercy. His coworkers knew he hadn't dated in years. They teased him about being uptight, too serious, too old-hearted, for someone barely in his early 30s. But when they insisted he try a blind date they arranged, they had smirks he didn't fully catch in time. To him, it was just a chance, maybe a small one, to feel human again, but to them it was entertainment. Inside the cafe, the scent of roasted cinnamon and warm vanilla lingered in the air. The place buzzed with cheerful conversations, soft laughter, steaming drinks clinking against porcelain cups. At a corner table sat a woman with her hands folded tightly on her lap, her eyes scanning the door with equal parts hope and dread. Her name was Annabel Myrie. She was heavier than most, her frame broad and her clothes loose, as though she had learned long ago not to draw attention. But what stood out even more was the softness in her expression, the kind that made someone pause and wonder what storms she had survived. When she caught sight of Marvin approaching, her breath hitched, not because she felt unworthy, but because every past experience told her she would be judged before she even spoke. Marvin offered a polite nod as he approached, gently easing into the chair across from her. Annabel gave a shy smile, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty, as if bracing herself for the sting of rejection she'd felt many times before. Marvin didn't mind silence. He lived in it more often than not. But he could sense something fragile in the air, an invisible barrier that separated them both from the rest of the world. He noticed the way she sat, shoulders tucked inward, as though trying to take up less space. He noticed her hands trembling ever so slightly, and he noticed the way other customers stole glances at them, some discreet, some openly amused. It stirred something protective inside him. They talked, lowly at first, awkwardly, as strangers do. She told him she worked in a small community library, how she loved stories but rarely found herself living one. He told her he worked construction to keep stability for his daughter, how he often woke before dawn and came home long after sunset. As they spoke, the initial stiffness dissolved, replaced by an unexpected ease. Marvin found himself listening with a fullness he hadn't felt in years. Annabel wasn't just kind. She was soulful, thoughtful, warm in a way that made the cold corners inside him soften. But then the moment shattered. From the table near the window, snickers echoed. Marvin recognized the voices before he saw the faces, 2 of the co-workers who had insisted he come. They were grinning, whispering loudly enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Dude, he actually showed up. This is priceless. Poor guy probably thinks this is a real date." He froze, Annabel stiffened, her hands clenched into tight, trembling fists. The laughter from the corner table grew, dripping with cruelty and the unmistakable tone of people who saw her not as a person, but as a punchline. Marvin's heart dropped like a stone. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was betrayal, disgust, and a surge of anger he hadn't felt in years. He could see Annabel shrinking into herself, her breathing shallow, her eyes darting toward the door as if she was preparing to flee. He felt something sharp twist inside him. He stood up, not abruptly, not dramatically, slowly, like a man who understood the gravity of what he was about to do. He didn't look at the laughing table first. Instead, he turned to Annabel. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "Annabel," he said softly, "look at me, please." As she lifted her gaze, hesitantly. "You are not a joke," he said, voice steady, "and no one here gets to treat you like one." The cafe quieted a little. Then he turned toward the men at the window. "You think you're funny?" Marvin asked, not loudly, but with a calm that made his words cut deeper. "You think humiliating someone who's done nothing to you makes you superior, or that setting me up just to watch me fall apart is entertainment." The men shifted uncomfortably. Their smirks faltered. "One of you stood beside me at my wife's funeral," Marvin continued, voice trembling slightly. "You watched me bury the love of my life, watched my daughter cry herself to sleep for months, and this is what you choose to do. This is what you call friendship." A silence fell so heavy it felt like the air itself stilled. "I came here today because I'm trying," he said, "trying to live again, trying to be more than the grief I carry. And she," he gestured gently toward Annabel, "showed me more kindness in 30 minutes than either of you have in years." Their faces reddened. Some customers looked away. Others looked ashamed for ever laughing along. Marvin reached for Annabel's hand, not romantically, but with genuine care. "You deserve respect," he told her, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You deserve people who see you for who you are, not shallow cowards who measure worth in appearances." Her eyes filled with tears, not of humiliation, but of something breaking open inside her, something long buried under years of rejection and cruelty. Then Marvin did something even he didn't expect. He asked her if she wanted to leave and get fresh air, go somewhere peaceful, somewhere away from prying eyes. She nodded, wiping softly at her cheeks. They walked out together, past the stunned silence of the cafe, past the men who suddenly had no words. Outside the light was brighter, the wind warmer. Nora, who had been with Marvin's sister just down the street, spotted her father and ran to him, arms wide. Marvin picked her up and introduced her to Annabel. Nora smiled shyly at first, then reached out to show Annabel a small flower she had picked, a tiny pink blossom drooping slightly but still alive. Annabel held it delicately, her eyes misty again. Something shifted then, in Annabel, in Marvin, even in the late afternoon air. They walked together in the park nearby, talking more freely, more openly. Marvin told her about the nights he cried quietly so Nora wouldn't hear. Annabel told him about growing up in a family where love was conditional on appearance, where she'd learned to disappear into corners to avoid ridicule. They shared stories, fears, small hopes, two wounded souls who, for the first time in a long time, felt seen. Over the next hour the tension unraveled. The world felt softer, lighter, less cruel, and when the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass, Annabel looked at him and whispered that no one had ever defended her like that before. Marvin replied that no one had needed to. She had always deserved better. She always would. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light. Your engagement helps more people discover these meaningful stories. Special request: please comment what part of the story moved you the most. And in that quiet, golden hour, under the trees that swayed like gentle guardians, it became clear that sometimes the most unexpected encounters, the ones born from cruelty, can still transform into something healing, something redemptive, something beautifully human.